here is some data. I won't get too into it here, but the bottom line is, in a mouse model of Alzheimer's disease, exercise reduced amyloid buildup in the brain. So the mice that were allowed to exercise had less amyloid buildup. The ones that didn't get to exercise had a lot of amyloid buildup, and it impacted their ability to learn. So this is the kind of information that we use, that we draw conclusions, and they're generally assumptions right now. We want to prove this, but we assume that exercise is going to help people with amyloid in their brain, where we're doing 2 big studies on exercise in the brain. So these are the ideas that we've been pursuing: is how does exercise, how does diet, how does mental activity influence the things that we've talked about, brain atrophy and white matter changes. What we've found, I'm going to talk just briefly about, and then we'll move on to the next talk, but we assess fitness level in a real high-tech way, where we're putting people on a treadmill and we're seeing how fit they are by measuring their oxygen consumption. That reflects how much physical activity they have in their lives, also some genetics, but if people exercise, they have higher fitness. What we found in Alzheimer's disease was that if somebody had Alzheimer's disease and they were more fit, they had less brain atrophy than those who were less fit. So that's showed here, these red boxes. The high-fit group had the largest brains. The middle fitness group had intermediate-sized brains, and the low fitness group had lots of evidence of brain atrophy. And that's on the left. On the right, we then asked, okay, that's across the whole brain, but where specifically in the brain do we see that relationship? And that's important because some areas are hit harder by Alzheimer's disease than other areas. And it turns out we saw that relationship where fitness seemed to deter atrophy in areas that were hit hardest by Alzheimer's disease. And that's the the bright areas on the right are areas that are all hit hard by Alzheimer's disease, and those are the areas, in the areas of color here are areas that are where fitness seems to deter that atrophy process. So what does this tell us? It doesn't prove anything, actually, but scientifically, it takes us a long way towards the idea of exercise might slow the disease process of Alzheimer's disease. And the way to prove that is by doing the studies that we're doing right now, which are clinical trials. And so now we're doing the next step and trying to prove that that is right. So this is kind of how we conceptualize aging and Alzheimer's changes. A part of the process here. So with age and with Alzheimer's disease, we see changes in physical activity levels. We see changes in cardiovascular fitness. Abilities, or a person's ability to do exercise declines somewhat. We can modify that with exercise, though. But through reductions in physical fitness, we think we see problems in brain and body. We see changes related to that in both the brain and the body. In our data, we're finding that reduced physical fitness does relate to brain and body changes. And those things are the things that contribute to functional decline, which then feed back to the process of age-related changes and Alzheimer's changes. And so we're seeing evidence of this cycle of decline. And the key is that these, reduced physical activity and cardiovascular fitness are things that exercise improve. And so we think to some extent we can interrupt this process. And that's why we're studying exercise as a medicine and trying to understand it more as a medicine, and with 2 main aims. How do we prevent Alzheimer's disease? So how do we promote a healthier brain? But then how do we can we use it to treat Alzheimer's disease? We know exercise is good for us. If you're doing it, keep doing it. If you're not doing it, try to start doing it. And we tell everybody to do it. Why are we studying it? We're studying it to really understand how we can use it to prevent Alzheimer's disease and treat Alzheimer's disease. And we're studying it to understand why physical activity would impact the brain. So there's if physical activity impacts the brain, what's driving that connection? Is it hormonal changes? Is it inflammation changes? So is it blood flow changes? We need to understand that process scientifically so that we can capitalize on this idea of exercise as medicine. And that's why we're studying it in a rigorous way.